so I was jamming there on Lazy Bird by John Coltrane, and we're gonna use this tune to explain yet another concept regarding bob scales. So I will talk about other stuff than bob scales, but I got a question, and there seems to be some confusion regarding bob scales. So I'm gonna try to answer that question if I understood it correctly. But first, we need to look at this tune, learn the chords, and what bob scales we're gonna use. And if you don't know anything about bob scales, I recommend that you watch my previous videos, because I'm gonna skip through a lot of stuff here, and I'm assuming that you already know a lot of stuff. So please go back and look at my previous videos if you don't know anything about bob scales. Okay, Lazy Bird has a bunch of these quick 2/5s. So as I've said before, we're gonna ignore the relative 2 chords. So if it's A minor to D7, I'm treating those 2 chords as only D7. So the scale we're using is a D mixo bob scale. And then the C minor F7, I'm treating that as a F7 only. And then we have 1 bar of F minor 7, 1 bar of B flat 7. I'm gonna treat those 2 bars as B flat mixo. Again, I'm ignoring the relative 2 chord, which I've explained in previous videos why I do that. And you could find other scales, but this is like the easiest thing. And then E flat major bob scale over the E flat, D mixo over the A minors D7, G major bob scale over the G major, and then D flat mixo over the A flat minor 7 D flat. That's the A section. So first thing we need to do is we need to be able to just run these scales, right? We need to be able to play them descending and ascending. For some reason, we tend to do more descending. So what does that sound like if I play from the root of each scale? Well, it's gonna sound like this. Okay, so that's how that works. I made a little mistake there, but so and then you want to start on the third of each scale. And the 5th and the 7th. And again, what we're doing is we're playing chord tones on strong beats and non-chord tones or passing notes on the off beats, which is by doing that we're creating the harmony, we're outlining the harmony, so you can hear the chords go by. This is what bob scales does. It creates the harmony in that way. That's why it's important to practice bob scales. If we play regular scales, we don't get the same effect. So this is pretty basic stuff. Like if I want to be able to start on each of the chord tones, like the root starting on the 3rd and the 5th and the 7th, ascending as well as descending. If you don't know how to do that on a standard, then you need to work on that. Having said that, there are plenty of jazz players who never practice this stuff, but I would say most have gone through this kind of practicing at some level. So we do that, but in this book I covered in my my previous lesson, the David Baker Bebop, How to Play Bebop book, he starts on non-chord tones as well, which also Jerry Bergonzi book does in his book. And the question is, why do you want to do that? Okay, so the goal is actually, so this, what I just did there, is pretty easy. The trick is to be able to connect the bob scales so that you play over the bar line, meaning like the last note of the previous bar's bob scale needs to connect with the next bars, which is very much more difficult to do, especially if it's a tune that changes scale for in every bar, which this tune kind of does. So in order to do that, we're not going to start on beat 1. I'm going to start on beat 3. Now, if I play a descending bob scale, starting on the root of the first chord, and I start on beat 3, I get this, right? Now, I need to shift to the next scale, which is a F mixo bob scale. And the closest note is a B flat, which is not a chord tone. So now, if I want to continue the bob scale, I have two options. I can play a regular scale until the next octave, which I continue on the bob scale if I want to do that. So if I start on the non-chord tone, I don't play a bob scale, I play a regular scale. So that it will eventually, I will end up on a chord tone, strong beats, passing note on weak beat anyway. Or there are other things you can do, but here I'm gonna do that. So what am I looking at? Right, so there I'm ending on a chord tone. Next is pretty easy because it's the same scale, so now E flat. On the E flat major, if I play bob scale, it's not gonna add up, so I ignore the bob scale on the E flat and play a regular E flat major. And then I land on the A, which is the fifth of D, so I continue with the bob scale. See what I'm doing? So I need to be able to consider the smoothest connection between the chord change. So in the beginning, it's a good idea to write it out like this, but then eventually you want to be able to do this automatically. So I wrote out a little etude, and I'm starting on beat 3, descending bob scale on every other chord, connecting it to the next bob scale. And I'm starting on different chord tones to give you an idea of different solutions for the transition there. So I'll try to play this, see if I can do that. Okay, let me try to do that over a real backing track and see a little bit faster if I can do that. Bear with me. So that was a lot harder than I expected, so I had to practice today's coffee is Espresso House, Sweden's own version of Starbucks, only crappier. Just to recap what I'm doing, I'm playing bebop scales, but I'm connecting from the previous bebop scale to the next bar when the chord is changing, and continuing. So there are different ways you can connect. One way is to, if you land on a chord tone, it's pretty self-explanatory. You just continue on that bop scale. It's when you land on the first note is a non-chord tone. That's when you have to consider. You can add more chromaticism, or you can continue with a regular scale until it adds up in the next octave, right? So the Bergonzi book that I've talked about before, Jazz Line, talks about this in a very, very good way, how you connect. So that's why we need to be able to start on non-chord tones as well to answer the question, if that was the question. Now, I wrote this out for you, so you can get these sheets from my Patreon. I also made a little etude for my Patreons, so which is the same thing pretty much, but instead of connecting it to a bop scale, I'm connecting it to little jazz licks and idioms that I've talked about before and that I got from the different books that I've used. So I'll try to play this little etude for you, and hopefully you like it. So I just want to talk for a second about why I'm doing this. So I recently had to get my teaching credentials, so I had to go back to college to get a teaching degree, right? And there we talked about YouTube and how it affects teaching, and I wrote an essay on YouTube and how guitar teachers use YouTube. So that's when I figured, well, why don't I give it a try myself? So I did, because I believe in sharing stuff, and I think the future of guitar teaching involves YouTube or some similar forum anyway, and turns out it was a lot harder than I thought. So you need to be able to have good content, you need to be able to have good audio and video. So I think I'm getting better at it, but I love for you guys to comment and critique. I'm not afraid of criticism. I actually am one of those people who like criticism. So if you have advice on how to improve my videos, I'd love to get that. But so here's my little etude over Lazy Bird, and I shall see you next time.